walk through the list of contracts that were let, the checks that were written, and anyone can feel comfortable having that conversation. Did you have to spend this much to fix the toilet? How much do you pay for a ream of paper? These, every citizen can feel comfortable working on. In ancient Egypt, people would bring cooked food to the stone god of Isis. So you take the cooked food, you put it down in front of Isis, and the stone god would absorb the essence of the lovely food that you'd brought. Then you'd go home, and the high priest would come out and eat all the food. Today, we're much more sophisticated than that. We bring buckets of money and put them before the stone god of education. And education absorbs the essence of the lovely money. And then we go home, and the teachers' union, the bureaucrats come out and take all the money. We are not going to win an argument about the necessity of sacrificing to the education gods. We must sacrifice to the education gods. But we can have a conversation about how much it costs to mow the lawn in front of the school. That's about spending. That's an earmark. That's not questioning whether we love education. And so by turning some of these issues at the other, don't you like public safety? Don't you like policemen? Well, actually, we were asking about how much it costs to paint the room. You know, and take a look at actual spending. If we can focus on spending rather than the value, the left wants to say, oh, the value is education. The value is police protection. We go, that's fine. We accept the values. Let's look at the spending. You paid how much for paper? You know, they spend it, they sell it for less at Home Depot. Why did you spend more? Then we can be in every conversation on spending, and every check that's written under transparency is an earmark and can be focused on. So I do think that this is going to give us the ability to do on spending what we've done on the tax issue in terms of making it a vote-moving issue. Not an issue that people talk about on talk radio, but a vote-moving issue, and that's the way we end up getting attention. Now, as we look forward, a couple of cheerful trends. The biggest demographic shift in the United States of America in the last 25 years is not the number of people whose parents speak Spanish. It is the number of Americans who own shares of stock directly. When Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, only 20% of Americans owned stock. Today, it's 50% of households, 60% of adults, as much as 2/3 of voters own shares of stock directly in 401ks and IRAs. At ATR, we worked very hard to try and get McCain to focus on the fact that when Obama wants to raise taxes on capital gains, dividends, and corporations, he's reducing the value of all the stocks in your 401k. So he's going after the savings, the lifetime savings of half of American households. That's not the 1 or 2% he keeps promising he's going to beat up on. That's half of American households, and more than that for individuals. We actually did a calculator, which we're going to keep up there, which walks through if Obama's tax increase is passed, how much it reduces the value of your 401k if it's in the averages like the market. And if Congress's tax increases pass, which are equally, actually worse than Obama's, what will happen in that case? We can translate the tax increases on income, on corporate income, on dividends and capital gains into the damage that it does to your 401k. So that's a growing part of the Leave Us Alone coalition, is people who focus on and care about their 401k. Now, the recent drop in the stock market has gotten people more focused on their 401k. And I think it's extremely important. At tables, I left this, the Democrats wrecked the bull market. You'll see where the stock market went up. It started growing after 2003, the tax cut, capital gains and dividends. The Democrats took the House and the Senate, and it started to move back down again. Because of the lower taxes, the stock market increased $7 trillion in wealth. All that's happening now is that $7 trillion, which came into being because of the lower taxes, is now disappearing because the Democrats have promised they're going to take away those tax cuts in 2 years. The market doesn't wait until it actually happens. The stock market didn't crash the day they passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff bill. The stock market crashed in '29 the day they announced they had the votes for the Smoot-Hawley tariff bill, when you saw it was coming. So this is an important chart to keep in mind, and unfortunately, Congress, and even if McCain was the presidential candidate, the Democratic Congress was not going to continue those tax cuts, which is why the stock market started to collapse as soon as the Ds took over the House and Senate, and you knew that they were not going to allow that tax increase to go through. The other handout walks through what happened to the stock market based on who runs Congress. You'll often hear people say, oh, Bill Clinton was so good for the stock market. Actually, the first 2 years of Bill Clinton's presidency, the stock market was flat. That was Bill Clinton with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. When the Republicans took the House and Senate, on the day the Republicans took the House and Senate, the stock market started to grow dramatically. And it did so until the day the Democrats took the Senate back and started to drop back down again. Then when the Republicans for 4 years had the House, Senate, and the House and Senate back along with the presidency, it shifted back up. I don't have the presidents listed on this, just the Congress. Presidents are vaguely interesting. They sign the bills that Congress writes. When the Democrats took back over the House and Senate, the stock market started going back down again. We need to remember to focus when we talk about this in terms of Congresses. Otherwise, Bill Clinton looks really good and Bush looks really bad on the stock market, except all of the gains under Clinton took place with the Republican Congress, and the collapse under Clinton took place with Democrat congressional control. So we shouldn't get wrapped around the axle of presidential politics, but take a look at what happens with the Congress as well. And then lastly, the longer piece, which walks through, and again, the Republicans, the forces for less government, limited government, competent limited government, did poorly in the last election. Better in Montana than in some of the other states, but bad at not well at the national level. In 1964, when Goldwater lost, in 74, when Nixon had Watergate, in 76, when Ford lost to Carter and the Democratic House and Senate, and in the 92, when Bush lost to Clinton with the Democratic House and Senate. After every one of those, there are a series of newspaper articles and quotations explaining that the free market movement was dead, the conservative movement was dead, the Republican Party was finished, and it was never coming back. And what Republicans and conservatives needed to do was to come to grips with big government and high taxes and more regulation, and realize that they should move to the capital L left. Each of those 4 times we managed to pass on the lovely advice from our class enemies and said, you know what, we won't move to the left, and we moved towards more of a Reagan Republican position, and we did that. I think it's important to keep that in mind because we're hearing some of the same voices. Paul Krugman on the day of the election wrote another piece, the Republican Party should move to the left. And you're starting to see them even from some so-called intellectuals on the right who are bored because ever since Adam Smith and Milton Friedman, we sort of know what we sort of know what free markets are, but these intellectuals on the right want to have something new to say. And unfortunately, the new stuff is often silly. So the left and the establishment press will tell us you should move to the left. Some columnists will invent castles in the sky of theories that they would like elected officials to try out. My suggestion is that they run for state legislatures somewhere and win with their theories before they try and impose them on the rest of the country. We actually have a model that works reasonably well, the Reagan Republican model of limited taxes, limited spending, less regulation, and a strong national defense that isn't an empire. And when we've run that, we've won elections and governed competently. When we get outside of that zone, we do less well as a country and as a political movement. So we're back into the rebuilding phase. It's easier now than, think of the people in 64, 74, and 76 who didn't take up the kind offer of the establishment to move left. They didn't know that their principles could work politically. They had a theory that Reagan Republicanism would work, but they hadn't seen it in